Hello and welcome to Wagner's Tech Talk. Today we'll be discussing the PowKiddy V90, and this is honestly a review that almost didn't happen. When I first began testing the firmware that is included on the unit, it didn't allow proper scaling of MAME games. And as we all know, the main reason why we buy these handhelds is to play those games we grew up with. Well, many vertical arcade games like Galaga, Miss Pac-Man, are the kind of games I grew up playing, and if the device couldn't do it, I wasn't going to review it. But then, I tried a custom firmware option that solved these issues. So in this video, I'll show you the device as it ships from the manufacturer, and then towards the end, I'll demonstrate how you can update the firmware, which provides more emulators, better vertical game scaling, nicer skins for the UI, and more. Let's get started. Let's go ahead and unbox the PowKiddy V90. The packaging is rather plain. It doesn't even mention PowKiddy or V90 anywhere on the box. The unit includes a 3-inch IPS display at 320 by 240 pixels, a 1020 mAh battery, dual speakers, and a USB-C port for charging. The V90 is obviously reminiscent of the Game Boy Advance SP. However, the V90 can not only play Game Boy Advance games, but several more which we'll discuss in a moment. Included in the box is a USB Type-A to USB Type-C for charging, as well as a very basic manual. Let's take a closer look at the V90. I went ahead and ordered the red model. It also comes in yellow. And on the side, here we have a 16 gigabyte micro SD card that was included, a power switch, and on the front, we have our USB-C port for charging and a headphone jack. Very convenient. And on the far side, we have a dial volume control. And on the top, we have your L1, your R1, and your L2 and R2 buttons. They feel rather good. Here's the 16 gigabyte micro SD card that was included with the unit. And at the bottom, you have access to the battery, which is, of course, removable. Here are the specs in case you're interested. The V90 is certainly smaller than the Enbernic RG351V. However, it's not nearly as small as the FunKey S. Yeah, this device is very tiny, but still an interesting comparison. On the top cover, you have the PowKiddy logo right here. And when you open it up, the buttons do feel pretty decent for a device at this price range. You have your L and R buttons, as well as your standard A, B, X, Y, start, select, and your D-pad. Let's go ahead and turn the unit on. The installed firmware is NX Hope and includes several thousand games that are preloaded for you, so it's pretty much ready to go right out of the box. There are also some additional apps, such as this MP3 player, which I've preloaded with the theme song to this channel. And as you can hear, there's sound coming out of both speakers. And you can also press the Start button to cycle between the options, including a pretty nifty graphic equalizer. That's pretty neat. Moving on, you can press the R1 or L1 button to cycle the menus at the top. There are a number of shareware and freeware games that you can play. Digger is one that is pretty fun. I've played it several times in the past. It's kind of like Dig Dug. But there's others such as Quake 1, Quake 2, and of course those are the shareware versions of the applications. And if we hit the R1 button one more time and go over to the, system tools, you can go in here and change the themes. So if you want to pick a different colored theme, you can certainly do that. And to shut down your device properly, move over to Power and press the A button on that button, and it'll shut it down. There are a number of emulators that are pre-installed, including Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Mega Drive, Famicom or NES, Super Famicom or SNES, Game Gear, Sega Master System, WonderSwan, Neo Geo Pocket, PC Engine, Final Burn Alpha, PlayStation, which does not run all that well. It has a low frame rate on this particular device, and it also includes MAME for All, which we'll also discuss in more detail. Now let's move on to the gameplay. We'll start off with the Game Boy emulator in the upper corner. I'll also show you the box art for each game, which also identifies the system it's emulating. All games that you see here were included on the 16 gigabyte micro SD card, with the exception of the MAME games. The D-pad didn't always seem to register in the direction I thought I was pressing, but it could have been the user. Tetris DX played wonderfully, of course. The colors on the display are extremely vibrant. It's hard to believe this device is only $40. Motocross Maniacs 2 was a fun game. I really enjoyed this, and I don't believe I've ever played it before. It's kind of like an Excite bike on steroids, but yeah, it was pretty neat. Now we'll switch on over to the Game Boy Advance and play Mario Kart Super Circuit. This game does take advantage of the shoulder buttons. Everything's already pre-mapped for you, so there's no configuration required to start playing. Now we'll take a look at Sonic Advance 2, also on the Game Boy Advance. Moving on to the NES, we'll play Super Mario Brothers. Now we'll take a look at the SNES, playing Donkey Kong Country. In the lower right, you will see the frame rate, or the frames per second, which is about half what it should be in some cases. It still plays rather decently, but yeah, there is a little bit of slowdown in this game. Next, we'll take a look at F1 on the Sega Game Gear. And playing PS1 games on the V90 is where things begin to break down. It doesn't matter if you're using the included firmware or the custom firmware, the CPU in the V90 is just not powerful enough to handle those games smoothly. Don't consider this device if you plan on playing PS1 games. PS1 is just consistently not a very good emulator to be running on this particular hardware. While there are no MAME games pre-installed on this device, I added some here. As you'll soon see, if you change the video aspect to normal, or scale aspect, or any of the other settings, it won't properly scale vertical MAME games. For most vertical games, you'll see only the top 2/3 of the screen, rendering the game pretty much unplayable. However, we'll fix that in the next segment by installing the custom firmware. The first thing you're going to want to do is make a backup copy of your ROMs folder on your original micro SD card that came with the V90. So go ahead and select all of those folders there and copy them to a temporary directory somewhere on your computer. That way, once we install the firmware to a new micro SD card, you can put the games back. Speaking of which, use a separate micro SD card. Don't use the one that came with your V90. You'll want to get the firmware from rghandhelds.com, so look up the V90 here, click the download link, and it'll take you to the GitHub repository that contains the image download. It also has some instructions here with all the download links that you're going to need. So we're going to click the PowKiddy V90 download in just a moment, but you also want to install Partition Wizard, as well as Win32 Disk Imager, 7-zip, and if you have a card that has data on it already, use SD card formatter to wipe it clean. Now we'll click the download for the PowKiddy V90 firmware. Click download, download anyway, and it'll go ahead and download the firmware. Once downloaded, right click and using 7-zip, go over here and say extract here. It'll take just a few moments to extract, and once again make sure that you are using a new micro SD card and not your V90s. In my case, I'm using a 64 gigabyte micro SD card for this demonstration that had data on it from a previous test of the V90, so I'm reformatting it. Now I'm going to load up Win32 Disk Imager and select the image file containing the firmware that we just downloaded. Select Open. Double check that the device in the upper right hand corner is the correct device, which it is. And now we're going to click the Write button in order to write the image to the micro SD card. Go ahead and select Yes, and the image will then be read from the file and written directly to your micro SD card. Once done, simply click the OK and go ahead and exit out of Win32 Disk Imager. Now we're going to eject the micro SD card and pop it back in, and go ahead and start up Mini-Tool Partition Wizard. We'll move down to the main FAT32 partition, make sure you're on the correct disk, and then right click it and select Extend. Now this will extend to the complete amount of space that is allowed for this particular partition, which in this case will be around 29 gigabytes. Go ahead and click the OK button and say yes, and the partition will be extended and allow you to copy your games. From there, simply copy your games from your previous backup. In this case, I'm copying Famicom, which is obviously NES files, into the NES subfolder. Repeat that for all the games that you have to copy back over to the device, and then pop the micro SD card in and power it on. The MyU firmware will then boot up. There's a pretty cool PowKiddy splash screen there on first boot. And we'll go ahead and press the L1 button and cycle through the menu options here. We'll go into settings, and here you can change the skins. So I'll go ahead and select a different skin. I kind of like this comic book theme, so we'll go ahead and select that. And then we'll go ahead and hit the R1 button and go to the emulators. There we go. And then from here, you have all your emulators still on there, and hopefully all your games have been copied back, and you should be in good shape. One of the emulators included with this build is Stella, which allows you to play Atari 2600 games, which is another one of the systems that I used to play frequently as a kid, and now I have it on my V90, and I'm happy. Not only that, you can move on over to one of the other emulators, such as MAME, and I've of course already copied some games to it, and now when we launch it we can select Scale Aspect and it actually works. So now we'll go ahead and launch Galaga, the same game we launched earlier that only showed 2/3 of the screen. Now of course it's a little squished, but it's fully visible. You can see the entire screen, and now I'm a happy camper. After installing the new custom firmware, the device seemed to operate much better. The skins or themes are much improved. The settings do seem to work fine, although I didn't notice any significant improvement in terms of performance. The CPU is still not powerful enough to play PS1 games very well. However, for everything else, I'm pleased overall. This device is available on Amazon.com for $48.99, and the reviews are fairly good. I actually picked mine up over at AliExpress. The reviews are also good there and a little bit better price. Amazon also has a better return policy should you receive a defective unit. I think the PowKiddy V90 is a fun and cute little device. It's certain to bring back some nostalgia to Game Boy Advance SP owners. After the firmware upgrade, I was much happier with this purchase and will likely be seeing quite a bit of use even after this video. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the PowKiddy V90. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button. If you'd like to see more from Wagner's Tech Talk, please click the subscribe. And with that, I will talk to you very soon.